Think about the Americas. It has these giant continent-sized countries in the north and some big ones in the south. In between the north and the south lies Central America. This relatively narrow strip is divided into 7 separate countries with a lesser population than Italy, living in an area about the same size as mainland France. These 50 million people speak the same language and share an identical history. So why are these 7 fragmented nations not a singular state entity, perhaps like the US? In fact, that's exactly how they were about 200 years ago. Today's divided Central American nations were once a part of a united republic, and they called it the Federal Republic of Central America. And this is the story why they could not stay as one nation. Before we start, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss a video from us. Central America came together as a republic in 1823, but the story of that unification goes further back, as it was shaped by the region's shared colonial past. Central America had been under Spanish rule since the conquests of the 16th century. It formed an administrative unit under the Spanish kingdom, and they called it the Captaincy General of Guatemala. However, it wasn't exactly like the Central America we see today. The Captaincy General was effectively a province made up of present-day nations of Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. These 2 exceptions were Panama, which was part of Colombia in the south, and Belize, which despite Spain's counterclaims remained under British control. So fast forward to the 19th century when the Spanish imperialists found themselves on shaky grounds. Freedom movements were gaining movement from Mexico to Central and South America. Finally, in 1821, Mexico and Central America won independence. However, the question for the former Captaincy General of Guatemala was whether it wanted to stay as an independent country or accept Mexico's claim on the territories. This was followed by months of uncertainty where fights broke out between regional rivals. Seeing that local law and order was deteriorating, the temporary conservative government in Guatemala accepted annexation to the Mexican Empire in early 1822. However, the liberals in Costa Rica and San Salvador did not like it. They were in open revolt against Brigadier Vicente Filisola, who was appointed by Mexico as the new ruler. Political and civil turmoil continued for another year until the transition of the Mexican Empire to a republic. The new government granted the right of self-determination to Central American states who pushed for autonomy straight away. It was in July 1823 that the Congress of Central America declared absolute independence from Spain, Mexico, and any other foreign nation. This was the start of the Federal Republic of Central America. The majority liberal government was confident of a bright future dictated by the principles of democracy. They were inspired by the Philadelphia Convention held 34 years earlier and hoped to forge a union as strong as the United States. However, symptoms of discontent were already brewing in the streets of the nascent republic. The major source of discontent was competing political ideologies in different parts of the country. There was a distinct conservative-liberal divide that threatened to derail the unification. Despite the destabilizing elements, the Federation went about its business in the early years. They formed a constitution, got a flag depicting their place in the world, and reformed borders. While all of that was going on, the 2 sides of the political spectrum remained at odds. See, the liberals wanted a strong republic with free trade, reduced role of the clergy, and all that progressive stuff. Meanwhile, the conservatives wanted a monarchy, controlled trade, and a much greater role of the church. It didn't take long for the country to descend into chaos. In 1826, liberal-elected President José Manuel Arce turned against his own party and sacked the Congress to bring in more conservative representation. The move instigated a full-blown civil war, where the federal government in Guatemala went up against Francisco Morazan, who enjoyed support in Honduras, Nicaragua, and even San Salvador. The next 3 years were marked with blood-soaked battles throughout the country. In 1829, the civil war ended with a victory for Morazan, who was elected the new president. The capital was shifted from Guatemala to San Salvador. However, this did not mark the end of the insurgencies. The provinces remained deeply divided, and despite establishing trade and diplomatic relations with giant neighbors, it remained very difficult to govern the state. Morazan's hold did not last long, and separatist movements started taking root yet again. Every region from Guatemala to Costa Rica was dealing with infighting as monarchists and secessionists refused to recognize the federal government's authority. Finally, the assembly dissolved the republic and allowed the provinces to rule themselves the way they saw fit. This was an inevitable outcome after the years of pain, not least the suffering of 2 civil wars. Nicaragua, Honduras, and Costa Rica seceded from the Union in 1838. Guatemala followed a year later, and the republic officially ended when El Salvador declared independence in 1841. Panama and Belize joined the former 5 provinces after their own struggles with independence, completing Central America the way we see it today. However, the dream of a unified Central America stayed alive for another few years. The first effort at a reunification came from Morazan, who had previously been thrown out from San Salvador. In 1844, he set siege to Costa Rica and quickly took control of the capital. Morazan announced his plan to recreate the Federal Republic and annex former territories. However, the general public did not align with his sentiment. He was captured and executed by firing squad a few months later. The next attempt against the region's sovereignty was made by American mercenary William Walker, who went to Nicaragua in 1855. He was backed by the Nicaraguan Democratic Party, which was waging civil war against the government. Walker took control of the Nicaraguan government and made himself president. Soon after forcing himself into office, Walker legalized slavery and made clear his ambitions of annexing the neighboring republics. What followed was the first instance of cooperation between the newly established nations as they formed a military coalition to force Walker out of the region. Despite a few more expeditions, the idea of unity as a single nation never captured the imaginations of the wider population in Central America. The region finally achieved relative peace in the 20th century, and the former provinces stayed on as independent countries. After the creation of the United Nations, a common UN charter, and the end of colonialism, nation-states with smaller populations have become more common. As for Central America, efforts for unification have now transformed into efforts for an EU-styled integration. The goal is to transform Central America into a modern sub-region that benefits from exchange of goods, ideas, and people. The integration agenda moved forward in 1991 with the creation of SICA, the body that provides institutional frameworks for the integration. Under SICA, the region has formed institutions like a central bank, and a Central American Parliament. While there is definitive progress, problems remain for the polarized region. With starkly different systems of government, turning the region into a supranational entity remains a distant dream. What is obvious, however, is that the idea of unification is no longer a part of popular discourse. The complex history tells us that Central America is probably better off the way it is today. There is more autonomy, less infighting, and an aspiration to join the developed nations of the world. Enjoyed this video? Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. See you next time!